really matters? That might be the most important question you can ask. So let's talk about it. Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. Thanks for joining me here today for another episode. I'm a little late getting this one posted today because I've been traveling for a few days, but I had some things I wanted to talk about, so I made a little space in my schedule to try to get this recorded so I could put it out there. I want to discuss the question, why do bad things happen? And I'm sure you've heard this asked before in a slightly different way, being why do bad things happen to good people? But I only want to discuss the first half of that question, why do bad things happen? And I'll explain why, because bad things happen to everyone and anyone. And I'm even putting quotation marks around bad because we're talking about things that we judge to be bad or we consider bad. And in reality, they happen to everyone. And when we ask, why do bad things happen to good people, we're implying that there are bad people for whom it would actually be okay if something bad happened to them. And to be honest, I'm sure most of us have had thoughts like that. There are people we know that don't seem to be particularly good people. They don't seem to do good things in the world or care about other people or live their life with integrity or love or compassion. And we might label those people as bad people. And oftentimes to us, it might seem that nothing bad ever happens to them. They get away with the things they do. They get away with hurting other people and cheating and lying. And it's painful for us to watch that happen and then to look at our own lives and see all the times in which we have had to suffer consequences for our own behavior. There have been times when we've made mistakes or even intentionally done something we might consider a bad thing, and we've had to pay a price for it. So it's hard for us to accept when there are people in the world that in our minds are bad people who it seems like don't face justice, do not have to suffer the consequences of their actions. But the reality is we are not good judges of that. We don't really know what's going on inside those people or what else is happening in their lives. It's simply that we're looking at external appearances and making these judgments, and it's not really a helpful thing. So that's why I'm not adding that last little phrase on why do bad things happen to good people? Why do bad things happen to anyone? Because they do. They happen to anyone and they happen to everyone. So let's remember that we're not talking today about labeling people as good or bad, because in someone else's world, we might believe that we are good people, we're striving to be good and to do the right things, but in someone else's worldview, we might be considered a bad person. The way they look at the world and what they see as good and bad in the world might put us in that other category as far as they're concerned. So really these judgments and these labels of good and bad are fairly arbitrary, and they're based upon our own view of the world, and they don't help when we're trying to look at these bigger questions of life. So we're leaving that off. We're not talking about good or bad people. Another thing I wanted to mention right here, it's not helpful to say when we're looking at bad things that happen to people that everything happens for a reason, even though that might be a conclusion that some of us could draw at some point in our own lives. In looking back at our lives, we're going to talk about that more. But right now, I don't want to introduce a phrase like that because for the most part, it's not helpful when we say that to other people. So I am not saying that. So let's look at when we ask, why do bad things happen? What are these quote, bad, unquote, things that we're talking about that we label as bad and most likely everyone would consider bad. First of all, of course, death, our own death or the death of someone that we love and care about. Illness, accident, injury, losses, addictions, natural disasters that destroy large parts of our planet. Really anything that seems unjust, unwarranted, perhaps unexpected, undeserved, which that word deserved takes us back again to the bad and good label, because in our minds, we might think that bad people deserve bad things, good people deserve good things. But let's face it, that's a very simplistic thinking, lower level thinking, and the world just does not work that way. The world is not a vending machine where you put in a coin and you get something good back for that action. It just doesn't work that way. So we have to get rid of that line of thinking. But we could say bad things that occur in our lives, maybe simply things that are unwanted, things that we did not want to happen, that we didn't wish for, we didn't hope for, we didn't want to occur in our lives. So we might label anything unwanted in our lives as a bad thing. I also refer to them as difficulties or challenges in life, because sometimes life presents us with hard things that we have to get through or that we have to accomplish, and they may feel bad to us in the moment while they're happening. And it's okay. It's valid for us to judge and label those things in the moment as being bad for us, because in the beginning, that's all we can see is this feels bad. This is bad. But what I want to talk about today, not is trying to understand why do these bad things happen, because that's an unknown, that's uncertain, that's something that we will not have the answer to while we're here on this earth. But how do we carry the unwanted, unexpected things that happen to us in life? How do we carry the pain of these challenges and difficulties as we go through life? So right now I want to read to you a parable. It's called The Parable of the Chinese Farmer. This is something that's been really helpful to me for many years now as I'm looking at the experiences of my life and whether or not to label them or how to look at them. So let me read this parable to you. So here it is, The Parable of the Chinese Farmer. Once there was a Chinese farmer who worked his poor farm together with his son and their horse. When the horse ran off one day, neighbors came by to say, "How unfortunate for you." The farmer replied, "Maybe yes, maybe no." When the horse returned, followed by a herd of wild horses, the neighbors gathered around and exclaimed, "What good luck for you!" The farmer stayed calm and replied, "Maybe yes, maybe no." While trying to tame one of the wild horses, the farmer's son fell and broke his leg. He had to rest up and couldn't help with the farm chores. "How sad for you," the neighbors cried. "Maybe yes, maybe no," said the farmer. Shortly thereafter, a neighboring army threatened the farmer's village. All the young men in the village were drafted to fight the invaders. Many died, but the farmer's son had been left out of the fighting because of his broken leg. People said to the farmer, "What a good thing your son couldn't fight." "Maybe yes, maybe no," was all the farmer said. So what I want to emphasize from this parable is that sometimes what we think is a bad thing in our lives turns out in the end to be good. And sometimes the things that we imagine will be good for us, that we want to have happen, can turn out to have some negative aspects as well. So this is why I was saying we can't always tell the difference between something that is quote unquote bad or quote unquote good. We don't really understand these words bad and good at all. And we would be better off, like the Chinese farmer, to reserve our judgment, to refrain from labeling things when they happen as either bad or good, and to simply sit with them calmly and say, I don't know yet. I'm not sure. Now, in my own life, I've told this story before. So this was something bad that turned out to actually be something good. When I was in college doing a pre-med major, I majored in biology and chemistry as a pre-med to make sure I would get into medical school, because it had been my entire goal for my life since I was 12 years old. So I worked very, very hard in college with this double major in science, and really essentially did nothing but study for 4 years. I didn't really ever go to any parties. I had very little social life. Every weekend, every evening, I spent studying and working to make sure I would have very good grades so that I would get into medical school to become a doctor, which was my entire goal for my life. But what happened is that I didn't get accepted to medical school the first time I applied. I got all rejections from every school I applied to, and I was absolutely devastated. At that point in my life, I couldn't imagine anything worse that could have happened to me. It destroyed me for a time because I'd spent all this time working so hard for that goal and then had the rug pulled out from underneath me by not getting accepted. I had no idea what to do or how to handle it. As I said, at that point in my life, it was the worst disappointment that I had faced, and I didn't understand why. I didn't know if I had done something wrong in my applications. Was I a bad person, just not meant to be a doctor? Was all of this, did I just fool myself into thinking I should have that as my goal, that I would be a good doctor one day? So I had to do a lot of soul searching after this happened. And a year later, I applied again to medical school. I got accepted to 3 schools 1 year later. So I had my choice of where I wanted to go to school, but I still carried the pain of that initial rejection with me. I felt it for several years and still questioned myself and had doubts and wondered if I really was meant to go to medical school, because I viewed it as only a bad thing. The fact that I didn't get in that first year was still a bad thing, even though a year later I got into 3 schools. I was still carrying this judgment in my mind that it was very bad that I didn't get in. Now, as it turns out, during my year in between college and medical school, I did some graduate studies. I worked as a bartender. I actually had a really fantastic year. I met a lot of people. I had many fun adventures during that year, which somewhat made up for all the things I sacrificed during my 4 years in college that I didn't do while I was studying so hard. So I learned a little bit how to relax, how to enjoy life, how to just have fun. And that was a good thing for me. That was very positive. And ultimately, I didn't know this for several years, but ultimately after medical school, I ended up getting into a residency program, which I wasn't excited about either. Not the program I wanted, but the program that I got, that life handed to me. And it was there, even before residency started, that I met my husband. My husband is a year younger than me. And so he went directly from college to medical school. And we started medical school the same year because I had a year off. So I wouldn't have met him. We wouldn't have been in the same residency class. And chances are we wouldn't have met each other had I not had that year off. So there was another blessing, another opportunity for me to see something good that came about because of what I had initially labeled as bad. Now, it took a lot of years before I could change that label, before I could begin to see, oh, I get it now. That was actually a good thing for me. it was actually better for me to have a year off. I'd exhausted myself in college working so hard, and I had kind of a new awareness of life and joy and fun and pleasure and happiness after my year off that I think was really important for me when I finally did start medical school. And then, of course, this whole idea that possibly I wouldn't have met my husband if I hadn't stepped back 1 year in order to be in the same class that he was in. So that being said, I just want us all to remember these little stories, and you probably have plenty of stories like that in your own life, when something that you initially labeled as bad turned out to be good. So it's nice to remember the parable, to remember all of your own stories, and to even imagine, is there a place I could get to when I got the rejection letters, for example, to say, is this a bad thing? Maybe yes, but maybe no. I don't know right now. I don't know if this is good or bad. Now, certainly when someone that we love dies, when we get a terminal diagnosis, certainly the first thing we're going to feel that's going to go through our minds is that this is a terrible, awful, bad thing that's enormously difficult to live with. And so however we view it in the moment is fine. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with viewing what happens to you as a bad thing, because unless or until you get other information in the moment, it can be a very bad thing. It can feel very bad to you. So I'm not saying you shouldn't judge it that way, but I'm saying it's good to have an overall mindset that sometimes our perspective on things changes over time. So keep that in mind. And I want to address death, which I think for most of us would be at the top of the list of bad things that happen. The fact that we will die one day, the fact that the people and things that we love also die. It's really important that we understand that though death is not wanted in our lives, it is ubiquitous throughout the universe. Death happens for every single living thing. It's not related to being bad or good. When a tree dies in the forest, it's not because the tree was bad, and it's not necessarily a bad thing that the tree dies. It's simply part of the cycle of life for that tree. When I visited Africa when I was in college, I got to do a 1-month course there. We witnessed a lioness killing a gazelle, and we'd been watching that gazelle, and as it ran across the savannah, its beautiful gait galloping across the savannah. And at first we hadn't been able to see that the lioness was chasing it. But eventually the lioness came into view, and to my horror at the time, we witnessed the lioness killing the gazelle, and later feeding her cubs with the meat from the dead gazelle. And so that was shocking and horrifying to witness. And yet, from the perspective of the gazelle, it's all bad. The gazelle was killed. The gazelle died. From the perspective of the lioness, she had food for her cubs to keep them alive and to keep herself alive. And so another reminder, as harsh as it is, the labels of things being good or bad are not always helpful to us to apply. Of course, as I said before, when someone we love dies, when we get a terminal diagnosis, we're not wrong for saying that's a bad thing that has happened in our lives. But ultimately, if we can sit with it long enough, it's possible our perspective can broaden or expand. And so I'm encouraging us to develop a perspective before we're dealing with that kind of loss, so that we've already visited this worldview, this mindset, and this perspective of maybe things that seem bad are not as bad as they seem. Maybe things that seem good are not necessarily as good as they seem. So I'm going to go back and using the term I suggested earlier, that we call these unwanted things. the things in life that we wish would not happen to us, that we wish would not have come to us. Why do unwanted things happen in our lives? The answer is we don't know. There is no answer to that question. We can talk about the cycle of life and death as a general concept, but when we look at why unwanted things happen in our own lives, we generally cannot answer that question. There isn't an answer. So I want to talk about some ways to think about that question without requiring an answer. And I'm going to talk a little bit, first of all, about the laws of thermodynamics. And we'll start with the second law of thermodynamics, which says the entropy of a closed system always increases, what does that mean? Entropy describes disorder. Disorder in a system always increases. So a system always goes from a more ordered state, which takes more energy to maintain, to a less ordered state. And in other words, things always fall apart. You can think about, say, a teenager's bedroom that you can clean up and put everything in its place and put everything away. It will naturally, over time, become less and less ordered because as the teenager lives in the room and does things, sleeps in the bed, the covers become disordered, drops a sock on the floor, there's more disorder in the room, leaves a notebook open, leaves a candy wrapper on the dresser, and an empty glass on the nightstand. All of those are the effects of entropy, that gradually things become less and less ordered over time, and it takes energy to bring it back into a state of order. So just think about that in your mind. And another way that I say this is that things always fall apart. This is just how it is in our entire universe. So these are laws that apply to everything in the universe. In the physical or material realm, everything falls apart, gets sick, loses things, gets damaged, stops functioning, and dies. And that applies to stars, applies to mountains, applies to forests, applies to birds, applies to human beings. Everything ultimately falls apart. Everything that is material, a physical form, will gradually disintegrate and fall apart. And that's the second law of thermodynamics, that disorder always increases, entropy always increases. So that's the hard thing for us to accept, that everything that is material will ultimately fall apart. But there's also the first law of thermodynamics, which says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. And energy is the unseen, invisible, animating aspect of matter that doesn't die. It gets transferred to somewhere else. And so when the tree dies in the forest, all of the matter of that tree is eventually transformed into nutrients that other life forms can use. It's transformed into different little packets of energy that nurture and nourish other life forms. So the energy that was within the tree doesn't die, even though the cells of the tree do die. Now, there's hope in that because we can understand that we ourselves and the things we care about that are one day going to fall apart will also experience this transformation of energy, and that the energy that animates us, that makes us living beings, will one day, even as our physical form is disintegrating, will be transformed into a different form of energy within our universe. Now, what that form of energy is, we don't know for sure. No one fully knows the answers to all of that. So that's open for speculation right now. And that's a subject for a different discussion. But what we know is, even though we have to live with the fact that everything material falls apart, we also know that everything that is energetic will continue on after the material form falls apart. So there's some hope in all of this when we have to accept the fact of falling apart as part of our human physical life here on this planet. We also have hope in the fact that our energetic aspect, our energetic being is going to continue on. So think about it. We spend our lives fighting against entropy. We are constantly trying to create order, to create beauty, growth, and meaning in our lives. We're working against the entropy of life. And perhaps as we work against it, we're transforming some of our energy of our lives into other aspects. There are things we create with our hands, and we're giving some of our energy to that. The tasks that we perform in life, the music we make, the pictures we draw, the words we write, all of those things, even the love that we share with others, we are transferring some of our energy into other forms that for a time may outlive us and can outlive us, though not forever, because none of the things that we're able to create will live forever either. That's another aspect we have to accept. So here we are on this planet in these finite lives, fighting against entropy, constantly trying to create something that has meaning that will outlast us. And yet that is a beautiful thing. It's really beautiful that we can devote the time and energy that we have during our lifetimes to creating love, creating beauty, creating joy for other people. That's amazing and wonderful that we are able to give our time and that we recognize that we have to put energy into these things in order to overcome the natural entropy that would cause us to gradually disintegrate away, perhaps at an even faster rate. So my thinking is, when we confront entropy in our lives, when we see things falling apart and we experience it, and we will, even if it's not happening to us in this moment, we will experience it sometimes in devastating, unthinkably painful ways. It may be helpful in the moment if we can refrain from labeling those experiences as either good or bad, perhaps like the Chinese farmer, to just say, I don't know, maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know right now. I don't know. I don't know what this means. I don't know why it's happening. I don't even know how to respond to it. So I want to talk about some ways that we can respond and some things, what I think we need to do when something falls apart. And this can be helpful to us to varying degrees depending on how devastating the event is that has fallen apart in our lives. So number one, we just have to sit with the pain. And this is where I'm saying, if in your mind this is all bad, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being in pain. There's nothing wrong with feeling that this is the worst thing. This is awful. This hurts. It's hard. It's the most terrible thing that's ever happened in my life. It's fine and good to validate the pain, to acknowledge it, to sit with it, to ask other people to sit with it. And if you're supporting someone who's had something fall apart in their lives, be willing to just sit with them in the pain, not trying to offer them reasons they shouldn't feel pain or explanations for the pain. Just sit with it. Just let it be. Allow the pain to come to the surface. Allow yourself to hurt. Recognize that there are no answers. There is no reason for this happening. There's nothing we can explain. There's no justification. Because of this pain, because of what has fallen apart, you are in darkness, and it's okay to be in darkness right now. And it's important, in fact, to sit in the darkness as long as you need to be there, as long as you are there, as long as you need to be there. Allow yourself to be there with the pain and sit with it. That's the very best thing that you can do in the moment when something has occurred. And as I said, it is fine to label it as this is a bad, bad thing that has happened right now. This is bad. In spite of all the things that I'm saying about good and bad, there's nothing wrong at this initial place of pain when you're in the darkness. Yes, it is bad. It hurts. It's hard. It's awful. And there's nothing else that you need to know and carry at that point, just that it's awful. But down the road, at some point, it's possible that there will be a little glimmer within the darkness and that you will be able to recognize or contemplate something other than just the pain that you're in. And at that point, you might be able to say, yes, it hurts, and I am still here. It hurts, and I am still here. I woke up this morning. I'm breathing. I exist. But I'm still carrying the pain with me as I exist. So you become aware not only of the pain that you're experiencing, but the fact that you are still a living, breathing organism on this planet. You're still here. This falling apart happened in your life, but your life still exists. You are still here on this planet. And again, that's not to say that's a good thing, a bad thing. Simply, it's what is. You are carrying tremendous pain. You are hurting desperately, and you are still here in this life experiencing this pain. And so for a while, you go on recognizing that, yes, each morning I wake up and I'm still breathing. I am still here. I'm still carrying pain. I am still in as much pain as I was before, but I recognize that I am also here. I am alive. And perhaps further down the road, you move on from that point to say, this hurts. I'm still here, and I am going to carry on the best I can. There may be a point where you recognize I am still existing, but in addition to that, I am going to participate in life, the life that is laid out before me, the life that is occurring around me. I'm going to return somewhat to that life. I'm going to carry on, go through the motions, live the best that I can in this life. So at that point, you are still carrying the pain, recognizing it, acknowledging it, aware that you're still here for whatever reason, why ever, you're still existing, still breathing on this planet. And there is a life that is going on all around you that you are willing to now participate in and be part of. So that may not happen for a long time after something devastating has occurred in your life, after things have fallen apart. It may take a long time to get to the point where you feel that you are going to carry on the best you can with your life. It's possible that you may never get to the point where you feel that you are carrying on or can carry on with your life, or it's possible that you'll go back and forth between some days feeling like you can carry on with life, other days feeling like you're back in the darkness of the very beginning when you first experienced this devastation. That can happen over and over again. I had one father that I worked with briefly whose daughter died, who told me, I don't ever want to leave the darkness. I don't ever want to carry on my life. I intend to only stay in darkness forever. However long I have to be here, I am only going to stay in darkness, and I'm only going to experience pain for the rest of my life. Now, I lost touch with him. I don't know how long that experience lasted. I don't know if he's still in that place of darkness. But for some of us, that may be how it is, that we don't feel we ever leave that place of darkness. But again, I'm saying it's possible that we will be at a place where we acknowledge it hurts. We're still carrying all the pain, and we're still here, and we intend to carry on in the best possible way in this life as it is now. And then finally, there can also be a day long in the future. This can take years and years. For me, it did. But a day when suddenly there is just a tiny bit of space that opens up that allows you to look back on this devastating experience that has happened when something fell apart for you, that allows you to see from a different vantage point. Perhaps you've been carrying on the best you can for years and years, and a day arrives when, for some reason, you get a glimpse back at the beginning of where things were when you were in darkness. And it's possible then that you'll be able to say, yes, that experience hurt. I still carry the pain. I still continue to exist. I'm going on with life the best I can. And I have learned something. Perhaps there has been just the tiniest little glimmer or nugget of something positive or good that has come from this experience that you'll be able to see at that point. That is the point at which you can acknowledge that something good can happen from something bad. And so all of those explanations I did before when I talked about my experience of not getting into medical school and how many years later I was able to see it as something good, even though it was all bad when it initially happened to me. I want to emphasize that this ability to find something good within the bad things that happen doesn't come overnight. That can take years and years of simply going on and existing and living and doing the best we can from day to day. It's not possible to jump from I'm hurting, I'm in this deep darkness, to I learned something in a short amount of time. We have to carry the pain as long as it takes, forever, if that's what it takes. We have to carry it with all of our emotions about it, with anger, with sorrow, with dread, with fear, with grace, perhaps. We carry it as long as it takes until and if a space opens that allows you to look back and to see that initial experience from a different perspective. And that's the point at which you will be able to find the good within the bad. Now, as I said, it can take years. It took me years to be able to see that. But on the other hand, the more that I've practiced it, the more that I've had things fall apart in my life, the more I move through this process with a little bit more ease and a little bit more rapidly. It doesn't necessarily take years now for me to get to the point where I can look back and find something good or see something that I've learned or recognize that it was really important for me to have that experience. It changed something for me, something about me that changed everything else. It was necessary, and in the end, it had some goodness to it in spite of how bad it was when it initially happened. So I want to just propose that by thinking about these things now, by thinking about why do bad things happen and processing it, and even reviewing the quote unquote bad things that have happened in our lives and looking at them from the vantage point we have right now, we may be able to help ourselves grow a little bit in our ability to carry this kind of pain and our ability to continue on with life even while we're carrying the pain. So my goal is that there be a way that we can be ready perhaps a little bit for whatever life is going to bring us next, because we know from the universal law, the second law of thermodynamics, that everything ultimately falls apart. And so there will be things that are going to happen. Maybe we're in a space right now in between where we're at rest a little bit and it doesn't feel as if anything is falling apart right now, but we can be assured that that will happen at some point in the future. And so the more we're able to think about this question and carry it in our lives, live with it without any answers, the more we're able to say, oh, maybe yes, maybe no, and stay calm when things don't seem to be going the way we hope they will, then I'm hoping the more we will be prepared for what comes next. Remember to tend to your physical well-being. Make sure that you're taking care of the physical body that you have with get enough nourishment and water and exercise and sleep and physical touch from other people. Tend to your mindset. Be able to acknowledge that we just don't have answers to these questions that really bother us in our lives. We don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. We don't know for sure. But it's okay because we can live with not knowing. We can stay calm even if we don't know. Tend to your heart. Find love and forgiveness for yourself, even when things do fall apart and seem to go wrong. Don't blame yourself. Don't shame yourself. Keep filling your well with love and compassion for yourself so that you can share it with other people. And then tend to your spiritual awareness as well. Tune in to what you're experiencing. Be alert for those little nudges, little bits of intuition, little synchronicities, little glimmers of light that may come to you even when you're in the darkness. Watch for any spaces that are opening up that might allow you to get a new perspective, a broader perspective, one over many years of time, after many other experiences and after learning much more wisdom. So I hope for you that instead of asking the question, why do bad things happen, you will instead say, how can I carry the unwanted things that happen in my life in a better way? So that's my wish for you. I hope this has been helpful to you. And until we're together the next time, remember that we're here for love. Focus on it every day. That's the most important thing you can do. And then face your fear. Be ready for whatever happens next and love each and every moment of this life that you get to experience. Bye-bye.